What happens once a for loop has finished executing? Usually you will want to summarize a block of output or move on to other work that your program must accomplish. Any lines of code after the for loop that are not intended are executed once without repetition. So let's write a thank you to group of car makers as a whole and thanking them for putting on an excellent cars. So to display this group of message after all of the individual messages have been printed, we place the thank you message after the for loop without the indentation here. So now we will write print thank you every car makers. These cars are special and great. And here, now let's run this and you will see this message is just executed once. So the first two calls to print are repeated once for each car makers in the list, as you saw earlier. However, because the last line is not intended, it's printed only once. If we add indentation to it, you will see, as you can see here, thank you every car makers, thank you every car makers, thank you every car makers, and so on. So we will delete this indentation and we will get this thank you message only once, because it's not included in this loop because of the indentation we didn't put before the print here. So when you're processing data using the for loop, you will find that this is a good way to summarize an operation that was performed on an entire dataset. For example, you might want to use a for loop to initialize a game by running through the list of characters and displaying each character on the screen. You might then write some additional code after this loop that displays a play now button after all the characters have been drawn to the screen. Python uses indentation to determine how a line or group of lines is related to the rest of the program. In this examples, the lines that printed messages to individual car makers were part of the for loop because they were indented. So Python's use of indentation makes code very easy to read. Basically, it uses white space to force you to write neatly formatted code with a clear visual structure. In longer Python programs, you will notice blocks of code indented at a few different levels. These indentations levels help you gain a general sense of the overall program's organization. So as you begin to write code that relies on a proper indentation, you will need to watch for a few common indentation errors. For example, people sometimes indent lines of code that don't need to be indented, or forget the indented lines that need to be indented. So seeing examples of these errors now will help you avoid them in the future and correct them when they do appear in your own programs. So now let's examine some of the more common indentation errors. So you can also forget the indent. Always indent the line after the for statement in a loop. If you forget, Python will not remind you here. And as you can see here, expected an indented block. So here, if we write, for example, car makers, and let's just delete this indentation, get an error also. So let's actually delete this and I will explain all of this. So the call to print should be indented. So, but it's not here. So when Python expects an indented block and doesn't find one, it lets you know which line it had problem with. And if we run this code again, and let's run here, and as you can see, we have an indentation error as line 3. So you can usually resolve these kinds of indentation errors by indenting the lines or lines immediately after the for statement. You can also forget to indent additional lines. So sometimes your loop will run without any errors but won't produce the expected result. So this can happen when you are trying to do several tasks in a loop and you forget to indent some of its lines. For example, this is what happens when we forget to indent the second line in the loop, and here we will not get any error here. And now if we run this, and as you can see here, record list object has no attribute title. As a result, the first print, and if makers here, this code will, and as you can see, let's car make, this code will run without a problem. We just edit this, and if we change this to car make, and we will get this as well. So here as the result here, the first printf call is not indented, and so that's why first print call is executed once for each name in the list because it's indented. But here the second print call is not indented, so it's executed only once after the loop has finished running, because the final value associated with Volkswagen here, and Volkswagen is the only one who receives the who receives the thank you every car makers. These cars are special and great, and Volkswagen only one who gets the miles per gallon is high on Volkswagen. And here this is a logical error. This syntax is valid Python code, but the code does not produce the desired result because a problem occurs in its logic. So if you expect to see certain action repeated once for each item list and it's executed only once, determine whether you need to simply indent a line or group of lines. So here that's now we are getting this error here because in for loop, if you have a for loop here, for now this print message will execute at once, but your program firstly execute your for loop again and again, and then after completing the for loop it will go to next lines here.